Yo, what's up guys? Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get rank 1 with on the arena ladder. Now before I get into it, there's going to be a Scryfall link down in the description, and if you click on that it'll have the full deck list there that you can just easily import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And as usual, I'm not going to be reading out the text on every single card, otherwise the video will go on for ages. So if you don't know what any of the cards do, just quickly pause the video, fire up the Scryfall link and have a quick read of any of the cards that you're unfamiliar with. So with that out of the way, this is my red-black Death Dweller Goblins deck in Historic. Now, Goblins is one of my all-time favourite Historic decks. It was the very first deck that I used to finish a season at rank 1, but it's just felt so outclassed recently and was definitely a big victim of the amount of power creep there's been in the format over the past year. You know, the old build that tries to ramp into Muxus and win off Warchief and Chieftain into Kranko just feels, first of all, just way too slow and clunky. You know, the curve was very skewed towards the 3-drop slot, and your whole game plan revolves around either trying to resolve a 6-mana creature or resolve a 3-mana creature into a 4-mana creature and then both surviving. So the deck just felt really slow and clunky to me. And also the deck was very light on interaction. You know, it was a deck that relied very heavily on its linear game plan working, and I just feel like the format's way too fast for that sort of build at the moment. So I've recently been trying out a load of other different Goblin builds, and I feel like I've really struck gold with this build in particular. It feels super strong, and it's attacking on loads of different angles as well. So one of the main things I wanted to sort with the old Goblins deck was the mana curve, and I've gone a lot more low to the ground and a lot more aggressive here. So the deck plays a lot like an aggro deck, especially if you've got Battlecry Goblin. But on top of being an aggressive deck, we have Snoop that generates card advantage, we have Pashalik Mons that can deal direct damage to the opponent without even needing to connect in combat, we've got Muxus, which basically acts as a one-card combo and provides an insane burst of card advantage, and we've also got Call of the Death Dweller that turns our goblins into really sick removal spells as well. So the deck has felt super strong, and it just attacks on so many different angles as well. So we'll start off by having a look at Call of the Death Dweller. So it's a 3-mana sorcery, and we can return up to 2 creatures with total mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. We put a Death Touch counter on either of them, and we put a Menace counter on either of them as well. So what we're interested in with this card is the Death Touch counter, because a lot of our goblins in the deck deal damage as part of their ability, and if you give a creature Death Touch, any amount of damage that that creature deals will kill the creature no matter how big it is. So with Fanatical Firebrand, for example, we can sacrifice the Firebrand to deal 1 damage to any target. So say we do that, we deal 1 damage to something and it goes to the graveyard. We can then bring Firebrand and another 1 or 2 drop back from the graveyard, and we can give the Firebrand a Death Touch counter, which means once it's got Death Touch, if we then activate the ability again to deal 1 damage to any target, if we target a creature with that, it will automatically kill it no matter how big the creature is. So we can turn our goblins that deal damage into basically unconditional removal spells, which is super sick. Munitions Expert as well. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any creature or planeswalker equal to the number of goblins that we've got. And so if we can get this into the graveyard, we can bring it and another 1-drop back from the graveyard with Call of the Death Dweller. And then any creature it targets, no matter how many goblins that we've got on the battlefield, will automatically die as well. And then unlike Firebrand, we get to keep a Death Touch creature on the battlefield as well. You know, it gets to keep Death Touch to then trade off with something in combat as well. And then it gets really sick with the 3-drops that we've got in the deck as well. So Pashalik Mons is a card that deals 1 damage to any target whenever any of our goblins dies. So if we can bring this back with Call of the Death Dweller, whenever any of our goblins dies, we can just kill any creature the opponent has by dealing 1 damage to it. And so it's super sick if we can get this Death Touch, and we also have Skirk Prospector on the battlefield, because we can then sacrifice any of our goblins at instant speed to generate a mana, and then Pashalik Mons, the 1 damage that it deals, can kill any creature the opponent has. So Pashalik Mons with Death Touch is so strong, especially against the creature decks. And then finally we've got Goblin Chain Whirler. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. So if we give this Death Touch with Call of the Death Dweller, it basically acts as a one-sided board sweeper that just kills all of the opponent's creatures. So Call of the Death Dweller is just so strong at dealing with any creature decks, and really helps to shore up that weakness that the old Goblins deck has, where it didn't really have much interaction. So next up we'll have a look at the 1-drop slot. So starting off with Fanatical Firebrand, obviously very strong with Call of the Death Dweller, but outside of that it's just an aggressively slanted 1-drop that we can also use to kill a lot of the really importantly played threats at the moment. It can kill Dragon's Rage Channeler, Llanowar Elves, Esp Sentinel, Thalia, Lunark Veteran and Soul Warden from the Selesnya Life Gain deck. There's a bunch of really important to kill threats that Fanatical Firebrand can just kill on turn 1, whilst also just being an aggressive 1-drop. Then we've got 4 copies of Skirk Prospector, which allows us to sacrifice a goblin to add a red mana. So first of all, this allows us to ramp into Muxus. We can ramp into Muxus as early as turn 3, and Muxus is just a really sick card in this deck, swarming the battlefield with goblins. Even outside of Muxus, just being able to generate mana in order to cast multiple spells in a turn is really nice, especially in conjunction with something like Conspicuous Snoop. We can sacrifice the goblins we have on the battlefield to generate mana to keep playing stuff off our library with Snoop. It's also really strong with Pashlik Mons, because whenever one of our goblins dies we can deal 1 damage to any target. So Prospector plus Pashlik Mons feels a lot like Woe Strider plus Mayhem Devil in the sacrifice decks, where we can just sacrifice our goblins to deal 1 damage to any target, which is great at both picking off creatures but also killing the opponent. If we can attack them down to a low life total and we have Prospector plus Pashlik Mons, we can often just kill the opponent by sacrificing all of our goblins and dealing the last lot of damage to the opponent off Pashlik Mons. And then finally, Skirk Prospector is also really good with Call of the Death Dweller, because unlike Fanatical Firebrand, Munitions Expert, Pashlik Mons and Shame Whirler can't sacrifice themselves to get in the graveyard. We have to trade them off in combat to get there, or them have die to removal. So if we need to, for example, set up a one-sided board sweeper and we have Prospector, we can just sacrifice the Shame Whirler to the Prospector, generate a mana, use that mana to play the Call of the Death Dweller, and then bring it back with the Call of the Death Dweller, give it Death Touch and just sweep the board. So Prospector helps to set up Call of the Death Dweller as well, which is really nice. Then we've got Battlecry Goblin. I've been so impressed with this card. It can apply so much damage to the battlefield really quickly. So we can pay 2 mana and give our goblins +1/+0 and haste until the end of turn, and then if we attack with total power 6 or more, we create a 1/1. So this can just produce so much damage out of nowhere. Say for example we just had Battlecry Goblin and 2 Snoop on the battlefield and we have 6 mana, say. That's 6 power in play. If we attack with all 3 of them, we get a 1/1, and then if we activate the Battlecry Goblin 3 times, that goes from 6 damage to 19 damage all in one go. So if we're going wide, Battlecry Goblin can single-handedly just win games on turn 4 or 5, just with its ability to boost the power of our board and give everything haste. So Battlecry Goblin is really strong at closing out games quickly. Then we've got Conspicuous Snoop, which is a way for us to generate card advantage, and Snoop has felt even better in this build than the old Goblins build because our curve is much lower, so it enables us to play multiple things off the top easier. It also helps us to keep hitting land drops because we can play the creatures off the top of our library to get closer to the next land if we need that as well. And also don't forget that Snoop gains any activated abilities of cards on top, which mainly comes up with Prospector. So say for example we don't have any mana left, we're tapped out on lands, but we have a Prospector on top. We can use the Snoop with Prospector's ability to sacrifice another goblin to produce a red to play the Prospector off the top of the library. And then, Goblin Trashmaster in the sideboard, we can sack goblins to destroy artifacts. That's another way for us to it's another card that we can have on top of our library that we can gain the activated ability with on Snoop. So Snoop is just really nice at generating card advantage, which is great against control, but it's also just really strong in basically any other matchup as well. Getting to cast goblins off the top of our library so we can keep our resources in hand is really strong. Then 4 copies of Munitions Expert. Obviously really strong with Call of the Death Dweller, but even outside of that, it's just a really nice removal spell on a creature that we can flash in to sort of ambush creatures in combat as well. Additionally, don't forget that this can also deal damage to planeswalkers, so it does have good utility against control decks as well as the creature decks. Call of the Death Dweller I've already gone over, but it's just such a sick card against the creature decks. Obviously against control we side out alongside some of the other cards that are kind of weaker against control, like Fanatical Firebrand, but we do have quite an extensive package in the sideboard to replace it with for the control matchups. But against any other creature decks, Call of the Death Dweller is just great at picking off creatures no matter how big they are, but also it can just provide us value as well. If we're in a spot where we need card advantage, for example, we could use Call of the Death Dweller just to bring back a Snoop and a Prospector to cast stuff off the top of our library. So it gives us really nice utility, but also just gives us access to really sick removal as well. Then Pashlik Mons, obviously, like I said, insane with Call of the Death Dweller, but even outside of that, it does give goblins essentially a Mayhem Devil style effect. You know, we can use the 1 damage to pick off creatures, but more importantly, we can also use it to deal the last points of damage to the opponent if they stabilize at a low life total against us. The ability is also really nice. You know, especially if we're sacking our board to deal direct damage with the Prospector. If we've gone really wide, we can use Prospector to sack our goblins to start dealing damage with the Pashlik Mons, and then once we've generated 4 mana, we can sacrifice another goblin to replace it with 2 more tokens that we can keep sacrificing as well. And also, don't forget that we can sacrifice Pashlik Mons to its own ability. So if we just have Pashlik Mons on the battlefield with 4 open mana, and the opponent uses a removal spell on the Pashlik Mons, we can just sacrifice it to its own ability to create 2 1/1s. So Pashlik Mons is just great at giving the deck a lot of reach. You know, we can finish off the opponent in the late game just by sacking our goblins. And it also gives us a way, similar to Battlecry Goblin, for us to win the same turn we play Muxus. You know, if we play Muxus and we hit Prospector and a load of goblins alongside Pashlik Mons, we can often just sacrifice our whole board to kill the opponent without even needing to attack. Then we got Chain Whirler. Obviously acts as a one-sided board sweeper alongside Call of the Death Dweller, but even outside of that, you know, like I said with Firebrand, there are a lot of 1 toughness creatures in the format right now that we can kill with Chain Whirler. You know, it's especially strong against the Selesnya life gain deck at killing their life gain enablers. But even outside of that, it's just a really strong, aggressively slanted creature. And this deck does play very much like an aggro deck in a lot of matchups. So Goblin Chain Whirler, really difficult to beat in combat, especially in conjunction with something like Battlecry Goblin, where we can boost its power, so it's basically impossible to trade off with. And then we've got Muxus. You know, like I said, this basically acts like a 1-card combo in the deck. It can flood the board, and you know, unlike the old builds with Chieftain and War Chief, where you're actively trying to win the same turn you play Muxus, oftentimes we can just win just off the amount of advantage it gains. But we do have a number of ways to win the same turn we play Muxus anyway. If we go Muxus into Prospector plus Battlecry Goblin and a load of other goblins, we can generate mana off the Prospector to activate Battlecry Goblin's ability to give our whole board +1/+0 in haste, which is, you know, often enough to win the same turn that you play Muxus. And additionally, if the opponent's at a reasonably low life total and we hit Pashlik Mons and Prospector, we can often just sack our board with the Prospector and deal a bunch of damage to the opponent with the Pashlik Mons. So Muxus is just a great way at sort of refueling against the decks that have a lot of removal, but also just winning the turn we play it in a lot of scenarios and just swarming the opponent with so much pressure that they can't come back from it. Then mana base, 25 lands. In the old Goblins deck, you know, the Chieftain War Chief Kranko deck, I was high on running 26 lands because I felt like Goblins is a deck where if you miss land drops, you kind of lose to yourself regardless of what the opponent's doing. And the deck has a lot of mana sinks as well, but this deck does feel a lot more low to the ground. You know, the curve is much lower, so I think you can get away with running 25 lands. But I don't think you can go any lower than that because one of the differences is we're not running as much ramp for the Muxus. You know, we're not running Wily Goblin or anything like that. So Prospector and Phyrexian Tower are the only ways that we have of casting Muxus before turn 6. So I think 25 lands you kind of need in order to be able to cast Muxus. And we do have a lot of mana sinks as well. You know, Snoop and Battlecry Goblin are really good mana sinks, and Pashlik Mons as well to a lesser extent. So 25 lands has felt like the perfect amount to me. In terms of the actual lands themselves, one Phyrexian Tower is really nice at both ramping into Muxus and also sacrificing creatures to bring them back with Call of the Death Dweller as well. But it's definitely a land that has pretty severe diminishing returns. You know, you never want to draw the second one of this. And we also need double red for Snoop and triple red for Chain Whirler, so I really don't think you can afford to run more than one. Den of the Bugbear is such a sick utility land in this deck because it produces goblins, which synergizes perfectly with what we're doing. I didn't want to go up to 4 copies though because drawing this when we need an untapped land after turn 2 is pretty awkward. And also Dragon Skull Summit is really important to be able to play untapped on turn 2 quite often as well, because we need double red on turn 2 for Snoop and red-black on turn 2 for Munitions Expert. And if we start cutting mountains for additional Den of the Bugbears, then Dragon Skull Summit definitely becomes worse as well. So I've been really happy with the current mana configuration. I feel like 25 lands has felt like the right amount, and we almost always have the right amount of mana for what we need. I'm not running Unclaimed Territory in the deck because we do need black mana for both Call of the Death Dweller and Noxious Grasp out the sideboard, so I like just running all of the good dual lands just to ensure that we do have black when we need it for both of these cards. So that's the main deck. I've been really happy with it. It just feels like a deck that's really hard to tackle because it does attack on so many different fronts. And, you know, we can swarm the board with Muxus when we're behind, we can attack early with Battlecry Goblin, we can generate card advantage, and Call of the Death Dweller just really shores up the matchup against opposing creature decks as well. Then onto the sideboard, starting off with 3 copies of Chandra Dress to Kill. This is mainly here for the control matchups, and I've been so impressed with this card. You know, like I said, Call of the Death Dweller and some of the package like Fanatical Firebrand and Munitions Expert will cut against the control decks. And we'll bring in Chandra instead, and it's so strong. I've much preferred this over the 4 mana Chandra because it basically does the same thing but for a mana earlier, and we can get to the ultimate on this really fast as well. So the +1 generates some mana and deals the damage. Like I said, we do have a lot of mana sinks in the deck. If we've got Snoop going, we can just plus this to generate more mana to allow us to play stuff off the Snoop more easily. If we need the mana to activate Battle Cry Goblin, we can as well, and it also allows us to ramp into Muxus a little bit easier, which is nice. Then the other +1, exile a card from our library, and if it's red we may cast it this turn, so that's another way just to generate card advantage, which is really strong against control. And like I said, we're cutting Call of the Death Dweller. We do bring in Noxious Grasp against a lot of the control decks, but other than Grasp, every other card in the deck is red, so chances that we'll hit something we can play off this is really high. And then the -7 is really relevant as well. You know, one of the big advantages of running this 3 mana Chandra is that we can keep plussing it, and because we're playing it alongside an aggressive shell, we're attacking control decks on 2 fronts, where if we can get a Chandra down on turn 3, or potentially even turn 2 if we have a Prospector on turn 1, we can have Chandra ticking up every turn, whilst also applying a lot of pressure to the board. So it puts the opponent in a really awkward situation where if they spend all their resources to kill Chandra, they'll often die to what we have on board. And if they focus their efforts to kill our board, we can often just keep plussing Chandra until we get to the ultimate. And the ultimate basically always wins the game on its own against control. So I've been really impressed with Chandra. And even outside of the control decks, in even more grindy decks, this is often a card that we can bring in as well. 4 copies of Legion Warboss is another card that we bring in against control. You know, like I said, we're cutting quite a lot of the main deck cards because we're cutting the Call of the Death Dweller package against control. And I really wanted to be running 4 copies of a good Goblin against control because Snoop is a card that's really important in that matchup. And if we start bringing in a bunch of non-creatures, not only does our Muxus get worse, but our Snoop also gets worse. So I wanted to be running a cheap Goblin that was good against control, and Legion Warboss fits that criteria perfectly because one of the things that you have to always try and figure out when you're against control is how much you commit to the board versus how much you hold on to into your hand to play around sweepers. And Legion Warboss really helps in that scenario because it can often just run away with the game on its own. So we don't have to commit that much stuff to the board when we have a Warboss because it starts running away with the game on its own, especially when the opponent doesn't have any blockers down. So Warboss just applies pressure, forces the opponent to tap out, and then we can still hold on to a decent amount of stuff in our hand to recover from that as well. So Warboss, just really sick card against control. Then next up we've got 3 copies of Soul Guide Lantern. So this is here firstly for the Phoenix matchup because Phoenix in general, we are very good against basically all of the deck other than specifically Arclight Phoenix itself. You know, with our removal package and specifically with Call of the Death Dweller, we're very good at dealing with their non-Phoenix threats like their Dragon's Rage Channeler, Sprite Dragon, Stormwing Entity and Crackling Drake. But the Arclight Phoenixes themselves are the problem because we can kill them, but they can obviously just keep bringing them back again, and we don't have any ways to block in the air. So having Lantern as just a way to shut off that avenue of attack makes the matchup so much better, and it also has the nice upside that we can turn off Delirium as well, so that they can't attack in with their Dragon's Rage Channeler and kill our big stuff with Unholy Heat. Additionally, it's also really nice at shoring up the matchups against the graveyard-based combo decks like Reanimator and Dragonstorm. Now, they're not very popular decks, but they are decks that can often outrace us because they're very all-in on trying to win on turn 4. So Soul Guide Lantern really helps to shore up those sorts of matchups as well. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Noxious Grasp. So this is here for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a way for us to kill Serra's Emissary versus the Creativity decks, which is really important because I've definitely seen an uptick in that deck on the ladder recently. It also is very good against Auras, because they're a deck that's going to bring in Hushbringer against us, which, You know, this deck isn't as vulnerable to Hushbringer as the old Goblins deck was, but it still shuts off stuff like our Moxus and Munitions Expert, as well as Chainwhirler. So having Grasp as a way to kill Hushbringer, and also as a way to kill all of their other creatures before they get too big as well. You know, being able to kill a Spirit Dancer if they're on the play when they start putting auras on it is really important. Whereas in that situation, you know, a Munitions Expert or a Firebrand is just too slow to kill that at that point. And on top of that, it's also very good against control, specifically the Lotus Field decks, because we can use Noxious Grasp to kill both the Strict Proctor, so we can start using our ETB effects again, and also killing stuff like Teferi. And then outside of that, if there's any white or green decks, you know, maybe the Selesnya Life Gain deck, or something like Elves, we can also bring this in as just a way to have more targeted removal against whatever they're doing as well. So Noxious Grasp, really useful at shoring up a lot of the situations, you know, especially against Hushbringer and Strict Proctor, as well as Serra's Emissary. You know, some of these fringe scenarios that our deck kind of struggles to deal with normally. And then finally we've got 2 copies of Goblin Trashmaster. So this is a really important card because this particular build of Goblins is quite weak to Grafdigger's Cage. You know, Cage is generally a card that was good against Goblins before because it shuts off both Snoop and Muxus. But in this deck it also shuts off Call of the Death Dweller. So having an answer to Cage is really important. Even though it's not that commonly run, we need to have it there. And because we're not running Goblin Matron, we do need to be running at least 2 copies, I think. But we can't just get away with running just the one because we don't really have a good way to search it up. Then on top of that, it's also really good against Affinity. We can use it to kill stuff like Witch's Oven against the Cat Oven decks. And it's also surprisingly good against Creativity as well, because we can use this to kill their treasure tokens at instant speed. So when they go to Creativity, they either have to Creativity on a creature token, which we can deal with stuff like Munitions Expert, or if they do try and Creativity with their treasure or clue tokens, we can just kill them at instant speed with the Trashmaster. So that's the deck. I've been really impressed with it. If you've got any questions at all, just drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer you. And now onto the gameplay. I've just got a couple matches that I played on the ladder so you guys can see the deck in action. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, sweet, here we go. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks decent, you know. Got some early interaction, which is important against the Lurrus deck. And, you know, even though we've got quite a lot of lands, we do have a lot of mana sinks in the deck as well. You know, we've got Battlecry Goblin, which is great to have a lot of mana with, so Hallowed Fountain tapped makes me think it's probably Auras because of Lurrus here. Okay, interesting. I didn't play anything there. So I think, you know, the risk versus reward, I don't think it's worth getting in for 1 damage here when we could use Firebrand to kill something like a Selfless Saviour. You know, the fact they didn't play anything makes me think they want to protect a creature, so having Firebrand open could be important here. Okay, Storm Chaser Drake. So I assume they'll have like a Karametra's Blessing here. So we'll fire off the Firebrand. Let's see what they've got here. You see a guard approach. What does I think that gives? Does that give hexproof? Yeah. Okay. So we could have flashed in the Munitions Expert in response, but we've got Chainwhirler in hand, which can kill it anyway. So this is getting max value off the Chainwhirler here, which is great. And then we've still got Munitions Expert for if they play like a Spirit Dancer or a SRAM or something here. Okay. So they go for Lurrus. Now we could hold up Munitions Expert for the Lurrus, but I think we're better off just going Battlecry Goblin and activate. We're getting in for, what, 8 damage here? And then I assume the opponent will go Lurrus, get back Storm Chaser Drake, and we can just play Munitions Expert next turn anyway, and then give it haste with the Battlecry Goblin instead. Okay, so they have a Spirit Dancer. It makes me think they probably drew that for turn. Could be an issue if they have a bunch of auras here. Okay, so they just pass. Oh, wow, Munitions Expert is a great draw here. So I think I'm going to fire off Munitions Expert now. We can deal 4 to it, which puts the Spirit Dance down to 3-1. And I want to do it pre-combat because if they have... Yeah, so what we wanted to do there is basically try and force damage through with the Munitions Expert. If we had waited until combat and they'd used Karametra's Blessing, they could have just... Well, we would have lost creatures in combat. So I'm glad I did it pre-combat. So now we can not attack, we don't lose any creatures in combat, and we can fire off this Munitions Expert during the upkeep instead. Whereas if we'd attacked first and they'd had Karametra's Blessing, we would have lost a creature in combat. So the idea was if they didn't have Blessing there, we'd have put the Spirit Dancer down to 1 toughness. We could have attacked in for free essentially, and then we could have still used Munitions Expert like we did. So they play Luris into Spirit Dancer. See what else they've got here. We've got a lot of options next turn. You know, we could either go for Muxus or we could just pump our board with the Battlecry Goblin. Battlecry Goblin does put an insane amount of power into play. I think we might even be winning here. So how much? Okay, I think we had lethal with Battlecry Goblin anyway there, but yeah, that felt pretty good. So against auras, we definitely want Noxious Grasp here, and I think we're going to be trimming on Muxus here. You know, Muxus is good. I like keeping the 1 copy in, but in general, auras is decided by how quickly you can kill their creatures. If you can keep them off the board, if you can keep their Spirit Dancers and Storm Chaser Drakes and SRAM off the board, that's the most important thing. Muxus does feel a little bit too slow in the matchup, but I like keeping 1 just as a way to burst onto the board if we happen to draw it. But yeah, this deck, I think we're pretty well set up against auras because we have so much interaction. So yeah, this hand looks good. You know, we've got Munitions Expert, we've got Pashlik Mons as well. And Firebrand's a nice one as well. You know, same thing as before. I don't think, you know, the reward of getting in for 1 damage isn't worth the risk of potentially being able to kill something. You know, especially a Storm Chaser Drake. Okay, so they just pass. And also a lot of the Auras decks are running Esper Sentinel now as well, which we can use Firebrand to kill. So we're going to hold up Munitions Expert and Firebrand here. You know, if they play a Spirit Dancer, we can flash in. Okay, sound. So now if they Storm Chaser Drake, we can activate the Firebrand. I assume they'll have a protection spell, and we can just flash in the Munitions Expert in response to that to kill it. Okay, yeah. So we can just flash in the Munitions Expert here. Kill the Storm Chaser Drake. Okay, interesting. So I think we'll take this opportunity to play the Den tapped here. And we'll just play a Battlecry Goblin and attack him with the Expert. And then with this Battlecry Goblin, we can just start attacking for a lot of damage. Yeah, okay, sweet. So the opponent has a slow start here. Oh, okay, they've got Portable Hole. So they'll take out the Battlecry Goblin here. So I think we'll just lead on Snoop here, just in case we have a Firebrand on top. Oh, wow, okay, that's sick. So we can flash in this Expert off the top during the opponent's turn now. So, yeah, that was a sick hit, because we were getting slightly light on removal here. Okay, so they play Luris. If they play the Drake, we'll definitely kill the Luris here. Okay. So we'll flash in the Munitions Expert here. I assume they have some kind of protection, or I imagine they would have played the Storm Chaser Drake instead. Yeah, okay. But that's fine because we can kill the Luris with Pashlik Mons here. So we'll play Pashlik Mons first. Then we'll play the Prospector, I think. And then we can sack both Munitions Expert and the Prospector to kill the Luris. But we're going to attack in first here because if they block with anything, we have to sacrifice fewer creatures to kill the Luris. And I don't really mind losing Snoop here. We've got double Den of the Bugbear in play to apply pressure anyway. So we'll just sack both Munitions Expert and the Prospector here to kill the Luris. And then we get to keep Snoop to play stuff off the top. We have Den of the Bugbear already. You know, losing Prospector could be problematic if they have Spirit Dancer into something else, but the fact they fetch Luris makes me think they don't have another creature. Let's find out. Okay, no. So, oh wow, okay, we've got Grasp on top, that's perfect. So we'll just fire out Den of the Bugbear here. Put them down to 4. And we've got Noxious Grasp on the top in case they do draw a creature, so I imagine we've got this one. Yeah, sweet. Nice. Okay, sweet, going first here. And, I mean, double tap land is a bit annoying, but if we can draw an untapped land here, this hand becomes really sick. You know, if we can draw a mountain next turn, that would be unreal. Got a lot of interaction, got Snoop for card advantage, so as long as we can keep hitting lands here, I think we're good. So a bit annoying we have to play another tap land, but at least Prospector gives us something to do here. But, you know, if we miss our next land drop, that's a real problem. You know, this is kind of the reason why I was really high on running 26 lands in the old Goblins deck, because you can just lose to yourself if you miss land drops with this deck. Okay, so even though it's just a Dragon Skull Summit, drawing our third land is really important here. Attacking with the Prospector first, because I think we're going to play Snoop here, and I'd much rather them use something like an Unholy Heat on the Prospector rather than the Snoop. See if they're going to use it. Okay. So there's a pretty good chance Snoop's going to die here, but I think on the off chance they don't have removal, it's important to get Snoop down because it will get us closer to our next land. So unfortunately we're not going to draw our fourth land. You know, we could have sacked both of these creatures to play Snoop off the top in order to get us closer to the next land, but I really don't think that's worth it. You know, I think Prospector, when we're stuck on mana, is a way that we can get around that slightly, so don't think it's worth it. So obviously we're against Phoenix here. Munitions Expert is nice because we can kill stuff like Sprite Dragon and Storming Entity early, which is good. But being stuck on mana is pretty annoying. Okay, looting. So we'll see how many Phoenixes they've got here. Hopefully none. You know, this deck, we can deal with their non-Phoenix threats pretty easily. Okay, one Phoenix, that's not too bad. But yeah, this deck is particularly weak to Arc-Light Phoenix itself. Okay, no land on top again is an issue here. But I think having Prospector is important here because we could potentially play Munitions Expert and then sack one of them to play an additional one if we need to kill multiple targets here. But yeah, missing our fourth land is kind of brutal in this game. Hopefully they don't have a removal spell for Snoop. You know, Snoop getting to live here would be huge. No, okay. So, we'll sack the Snoop to make a red mana, and I think because of the other Munitions Expert in hand, I think we probably want to use this mana to get another Munitions Expert in play. You know, we're stuck on mana, so we don't want to waste any mana. So even though we're not going to kill anything off this Munitions Expert, I think it's important to get it into play. First of all, so that we have more creatures in play for the... Oh, wow. I didn't even clock they discarded 2 Phoenixes. Yikes. Okay. That's going to be tough to beat. I mean, thankfully we do have... We can kill 2 of those Phoenixes next turn, so we'll wait for them to attack. And then we can flash in a Munitions Expert to kill 1. Sack a Munitions Expert and then play the second one. But, you know, even then we're taking 3. And then if they can get them back again, we're dead anyway, so we've just got to hope they don't have much in hand here, I think. Okay, 1 to the top isn't good. But yeah, like I said, actual Arc-Light Phoenix is the toughest thing for this deck to beat. We can beat most of their other threats. Oh man. Okay, so we would love to kill Storming Entity with the Munitions Expert here, but we really can't afford to. Because if we kill Storming Entity and an Arc-Light Phoenix, we're just dead on board next turn anyway. You know, at least if we kill 2 Arc-Light Phoenixes here, we go down to 8, so we're not quite dead on board. We have some sort of a chance of winning, whereas if we kill Storming Entity... I mean, it looks like they have something at instant speed here anyway, so I don't think Munitions Expert would kill the Entity anyway. So we'll kill 1 Phoenix, we'll sack an Expert, and we'll get the second down here. So we do have some outs though. You know, if all 3 of our creatures survive, we could draw Muxus, which could potentially get us back into the game. I think Call of the Death Dweller can kill both of their creatures, but then we just have to hope that they don't have any spells in hand to bring back phoenixes from the grave. So we need to get very lucky to win here, basically. But we still have a chance. Just a very, very small one. See what else they've got. Looks like they're thinking about, yeah. I mean, that's a good play from the opponent because that does shut off Muxus, which we could have had in hand for all they know. Okay, yikes. I think we probably lost this, but you know, if they have 2 lands in hand, we might still be able to win. So we'll attack first here because I don't think there's any way they're going to block. You know, we could very well have another munitions expert. Yeah, okay, so we'll play Chainwhirler here and just hope they've got 2 lands and draw a 3rd land here. But I mean, even then they can looting. They might even have enough in their graveyard to escape Ox here, so... Yeah, okay, we're dead. So that was pretty rough, but we did stumble on mana, and Arclight Phoenix specifically is what we're weak to, and they had 3 of them. So sideboarding wise, bring in 3 Lantern. I'm going to trim on Muxus because, you know, similar to Auras, this is a matchup where it's all about how quickly you can react and kill what the opponent has. So Muxus does feel a little bit slow in this matchup. But I think overall, you know, now we've got Lanterns in, that should definitely help against the Phoenixes, and we're very good against their other threats. So what did we see? We saw Storming Entity and Dragon's Rage Channeler. We don't know if they're running Crackling Drake or Sprite Dragon yet, but... Okay, this hand is great. Munitions Expert and Chainwhirler as early interaction. Pashlik Mons can work as good interaction here as well. And the great thing about Munitions Expert and Chainwhirler and stuff like this is it's removal on a body, so we get to keep a creature in play as we're killing the opponent's stuff as well, which is sick. Okay, I think opponent's still considering their mulligan. But yeah, we're very happy with this hand. Again, slightly weak to Phoenix specifically, but we do, you know, we could get aggressive with this hand fairly easily, get Chainwhirler down into Pashlik Mons. We do obviously have to be thinking about Anger of the Gods though, because I imagine that's a card they'll have brought in against us. Okay, Dragon's Rage Channeler. I mean, that's one I'm happy to see because we can just kill it with Munitions Expert here. Definitely going to do it during the main phase because we don't want them to get any value off the Surveil if we can avoid it. Sprite Dragon, okay, I mean, I'm really happy to see that. We're going to get max value off this Chainwhirler here. Nice, that feels pretty good. And now we're applying quite a lot of pressure. They're already down to 16 and we've got 4 power in play, so... See what they got here. So having another Munitions Expert is great. You know, if they have something like a Storming Entity, we can just kill that and start attacking in for quite a lot of damage. Got Snoop as well to start providing card advantage. And as you can see, even in non-control matchups, Snoop being able to generate advantage in this deck is so strong, even in matchups like Phoenix. Okay, so you got to hope they don't have loads of Phoenixes here. Okay, just one, that's fine. Another looting, we'll see if they drew any more. I mean, they're going to be quite light on resources here, because looting is technically a minus. You know, they're not gaining card advantage there. Wow, and Lightning Axe, so they're down to 1 card in hand. Crazy. Okay, so they get him for 3. I think we'll lead on Snoop here and hold up Munitions Expert. You know, they've only got one card in hand. If they spend their turn killing Snoop, then I'm completely fine with that. Now, I do need to be thoughtful, you know. You could very easily kill this Phoenix with Munitions Expert, but if they just attack for 3 here, I think I'm going to just take it, because they could have Storming Entity, which we'd want to kill. You know, we'd want to save Munitions Expert for that, but we also need to think about Anger of the Gods, because if they attack and we Munitions Expert and kill Arclight Phoenix, and then they play Anger of the Gods, that's really bad, because their Arclight Phoenix goes to the graveyard so they can bring it back, and we lose all of our creatures. So if they just attack first here, I think we'll just take the 3 and hold on to the Munitions Expert just to play around those 2 scenarios. But we'll see what they do. Okay, consider. Makes me think they probably don't have Storming Entity, because they would probably do that after combat, I'd imagine, if they're going to. Then in terms of my plays, you know, if they play more stuff here, I think I'm happy using the Expert on the Phoenix now, because if they had Anger of the Gods, I imagine killing a Snoot would be the priority, so they would probably just attack and then Anger of the Gods post-combat. And they don't have enough mana for Storming Entity now anyway. Okay, they Lightning Axe the Snoop, so they're completely out of cards in hand now. So now I think I'm happy to Expert this Phoenix. You know, we are obviously vulnerable to Anger of the Gods off the top, but they're completely out of cards now, so I think we've just got to start applying pressure. And we can start sacking these Munitions Expert to Passionate Monsters to start like duplicating our Goblin tokens, or start like duplicating our Goblins every turn. Okay, they flash back the looting. Okay, sounds. So yeah, like I said, you know, that game felt so much easier because they just didn't have a bunch of Phoenixes. And that's why Soul Guide Lantern is so important in the matchup. Okay. Yeah, this hand looks good. I mean, we really do want to draw an actual black source that isn't Phyrexian Tower so that we can play Munitions Expert, but having Call of the Death Dweller plus Expert and Firebrand is really strong. Okay, Chandler is great to see because we can just kill that with Firebrand. Another Expert. Okay, so we really want to draw an untapped black source. Or like an sorry, an actual black source, because that's the problem with Tower. You know, even though it does produce black, it doesn't produce black when you've got no creatures on the battlefield. Sprite Dragon. Okay, we really want to draw an untapped black source here. Ah, goddamn. That's unfortunate, because we could have just flashed in an Expert and killed Sprite Dragon before it got any bigger. I mean, at least we have Tower next turn if the Battlecry Goblin survives. We can sack it and then play multiple Munitions Experts potentially. Okay, so that's annoying because we have to, you know, even if we do draw an untapped black source now, we can't kill either of those creatures because we don't have enough Goblins in play off the Munitions Expert. Although we could actually, no, we can play Call of the Death Dweller. Oh goddamn. If we draw an untapped black source there, we could have played Call of the Death Dweller to get back Battlecry Goblin and Firebrand could kill either of their creatures. But unfortunately we didn't draw an untapped black source, so we just have to play Battlecry Goblin here. Now thankfully, if Battlecry Goblin survives here, we still have a chance of killing both of their creatures. Because assuming they don't hold on to instant speed removal, we can play the mountain, sack the Battlecry Goblin to Phyrexian Tower, play Call of the Death Dweller to get back Battlecry Goblin and Firebrand, then flash in Munitions Expert to kill the Storming Entity, and then use the Firebrand to kill the Sprite Dragon. So it looks like they don't have priority here. It skips straight through, so I think we might be able to get away with that. So I think I'll attack first here. And then we will sack the Battlecry Goblin to Phyrexian Tower to produce 2 black. We want to make sure we don't get screwed by the auto tapper here. So we'll Call of the Death Dweller. Yeah. Firebrand and Battlecry Goblin. We'll give the Firebrand Death Touch. We'll give the Battlecry Goblin Menace. Then we can flash in the Munitions Expert to kill the Storming Entity here. And we could wait till their turn to activate the Firebrand, but I think it's probably safer to just do it now. We'll just kill the Sprite Dragon. And now they've only got 1 card left in hand. Now it is annoying we stabilised at 8, that is quite a low life total, but they've only got 2 cards left in hand. They've only got 3 lands as well. Okay, Sprite Dragon. It doesn't look, yeah, it's passing priority, so we can just kill Sprite Dragon with the Munitions Expert. So we could attack first, but I imagine we're just going to activate the Battlecry Goblin anyway, so it shouldn't matter. So we'll sack it, play the Munitions Expert here to kill the Sprite Dragon. And, I was going to activate the Battlecry Goblin to play around Anger of the Gods a bit, but we've already got Den of the Bugbear, so I think we're probably better off playing Snoop actually, which means that we should have attacked before we sacked that Munitions Expert. We missed out on a point of damage there, but I'm hoping it shouldn't really matter. So puts them down to 16. And we've got Snoop. You know, Anger of the Gods would be annoying, but we've still got Den of the Bugbear. You know, in a worst case scenario for that. So Expressive Iteration's pretty good. Let's just hope they don't hit anything too good here. Okay, Unholy Heat. So I imagine they're killing Snoop here. Okay, they got Channeler as well. I mean, Battlecry Goblin can kind of win the game from here if they do kill the Snoop. You know, we could activate Den of the Bugbear here, but since they're forced to attack with the Channeler, I think we're probably better off just activating the Battlecry Goblin, because we can get in for a huge amount of damage here. We can activate Battlecry Goblin twice to get over 6 power, so we produce the token, and then we can pump again, and that would get in for how much here? Well, that's 7. We'd get in for 9 damage if they block the token here, which will put them down to 5. And they have to attack him with the Channeler next turn, so I don't honestly know what they could do. I think Anger of the Gods is the only thing that saves them here, and then we've still got Den of the Bugbear after that as well, so this just shows how much pressure Battlecry Goblin can apply. It's kind of crazy. Okay, sweet, we got there, nice.